Hey everyone, I'm Cappy and you're watching Beyond the Plate, but just a taste. If you'd like to hear this podcast episode in its entirety, you can do so on all major podcast platforms. As for me, I'm a chef by trade and hospitality professional. These days, I head up Rachel Ray's culinary operations and co-founded her cooking and kids charity called Yummo. 5 years ago, I had the idea to put together a podcast where we sit down with the world's culinary elite and explore their journey into the food industry and the social impact they have made in their community, how they give back, hence the name Beyond the Plate. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you listened before, we're so glad you're back. We're bringing you a little taste of our full audio episodes here and hope it inspires you to cook or, like the chefs we feature, make a difference in your community. Reminder, the entire conversation is on our podcast Beyond the Plate. On to this week's episode. Please enjoy this episode as we go beyond the plate with the chef I partly blame for the existence of this podcast, Chef Jose Garces.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for such a nice introduction. And I'm really happy to be on the show with you.
I once ate at 5 of your restaurants in one night.
Oh my gosh.
said no one ever except me. But I remember when I asked you where to start my evening, without hesitation, you had said Amada, likely because it's your baby, you know? You've mentioned Amada, Spanish tapas, but it's your first restaurant. So just tell us a little more. Why the name? And how did Philadelphians take to it when it opened?
Yeah. So Amada, Spanish concept. Actually, when I finished at the end of cooking school, they asked us to create a business plan for a restaurant, and so it was a Spanish tapas restaurant. And you know, what's the place in Chicago? The Spanish place, Cafe Iberico. You've been to that? It's been there a long time. It's on LaSalle. That was experiential for me back then. Fun, festive, small plates, and so I guess at that time, like, oh, this is great. So I felt like as a chef, I was limited in the appetizer entree realm of like format. Right. I had a problem with it. I was like, it's such a big commitment as a diner, even myself as a diner, to be like stuck with this entree. So I always loved the idea of small plates, and naturally, Spain has that kind of that pedigree. So I'm like, okay, this format works. I love Spanish food. I was in Spain, and the name was easy. I named it after my grandma. Her nickname was Mamita Amada, which means beloved. And, it just kind of rolls off your tongue. It creates this, and it still does. The restaurant's, Amada is going to be, we just turned 17. We'll be 18 coming up here in 2023. And it just has, still to this day, has this aura energy about it when you walk in. That's just feels good. It feels warm, feels inviting. And I'm excited because I'm opening an Amada out in the suburbs here in Pennsylvania, Wayne, Pennsylvania. Wayne Radnor. And the brand is still like, it just resonates. It hits so many different categories. And I can't tell you how many folks have said, I got engaged there. It's like, a special anniversary or whatever. It's just, it's a special place. So if folks come to Philly, come see us.
That's cool. So you've opened a number of restaurants since Amada, probably at least 10, I'm guessing. Looking back, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
It's really, it's one thing to be creative, right? And to be able to have the ability to create and do. It's another thing to be able to create and then master those things that you create, like really master them, and also maintain them and sustain them. Because that's the other aspect of it. So when you're in your creative mode, you're like, oh man, sky's the limit. Let's go. Let's do this. But knowing now that there's a certain amount of respect that I have for mastery of one thing or two things. Like in this day, back in those days, I was just very, very much like had this. I wanted to get my ideas out there. I wanted to get my concepts out there. Get really, and so, and my strategy was, well, if I can recruit and train the talent that can keep up with my, standards and my vision, then not a problem. We could do it. But that's challenging, and yeah, so that's the one thing I would tell my old self. Hey, be careful. It's a lot, and it's a lot to like really like do them all like the way you want to do them. In fact, even now, you know, um, we've gone through this period of COVID, and we've had a lot of like really talented people in the industry leave because of uncertainty, because it's tough, better benefits, less stress, better work environment, all these things that kind of come with it. And I'm going through our restaurants, and it still keeps me up at night. And I'm like, like we really got to roll our sleeves up here and continue to train, continue to mentor, continue to foster like what we're doing, because otherwise, quality slips. So it's really, it's slippery slope.
One of our early seasons, we talked with Rich Melman, who I'm sure you're familiar with as a Chicago guy, but he was making some interesting points about growth from like 1 to 2 restaurants versus like going from 2 to 10 restaurants. With that said, was it harder for you having that first one of your own and opening up a second, or having 2 and scaling in a bigger way?
I think, for me, because I had the initial like multi-unit experience having Alma de Cuba and Alves, 2 felt very manageable, and 3 felt okay too within the city footprint and all that. I think when we started getting into other states and moving, we were in Scottsdale, Arizona, we were in Palm Springs, California. I was in Chicago for a long time, which didn't feel like I had a great team there. But I think that scaling and kind of maintaining, the brands and the integrity, that's when it became more challenging. And I remember like coming home from the airport on a visit to one of the restaurants and being like, not sure how I feel about that situation. So yeah, and it gets, and I think some chefs have can look at it and say, well, that's just part of the business. I don't know that I view it that way anymore.
So, another thing I'm always fascinated about with you and your concepts is how and you've talked about this a tad, like weaving various cultures and cuisines into your restaurants while staying true, like to your roots. I mentioned I ate at Chifa, which R.I.P. I love that place, man. Which was a Peruvian Chinese concept. But I didn't realize the extent of like your love of Japan.
That's special. Well, it came from when I was on season 2 of Next Iron Chef. The kind of semifinals were filmed in Japan, and so we spent about 2 weeks, like just filming, battling, but also taking in the culture, which was amazing. And then I maybe 2 years later, I took my kids when they were smaller. I said, hey, I want to bring you guys to this place. So we went to Kyoto in Japan. It was a very culinary and culturally driven tour for about 12 days as well. And so what I came, what really, and I've been a culinary traveler for years. I've always enjoyed that part of it. But really the appreciation for ingredients that Japanese culture has. They have, the best strawberries, the best mangoes. I actually bought a $300 mango there, and it was, amazing. And you know what?
I totally would have.
It was amazing. Too. It was amazing. So yeah. And I think what I also appreciated about it is like there's specialization. So, if you're going to get soba, you just get soba. If you're going to get tempura, the guy just only making tempura.
Love that.
So I appreciated, still, really appreciate the food culture. And it's funny, when we opened Chifa, I went to Lima and Cusco in search of chifa, right? This kind of fusion of Chinese and Peruvian cuisines. And what I found was like, Chinese restaurants just making Chinese food with some Peruvian ingredients. So I had to come back and actually make that fusion here. But while I was there, I did discover Nikkei cuisine, which was a fusion of Peruvian and Japanese cuisine. And there was several restaurants that practiced it. Amazing. So, and I think, that's Nobu's inspiration as well. That's, part of his story. I'm a big fan of Chef Nobu. And so yeah, it's out there. I think that you never know.
You've opened a bunch of restaurants. You've closed some. How do you handle a restaurant closing? Obviously, it's not easy.
Tough. That's really hard. I think no matter what it is, and I think that what I've come to understand, and I struggled with it for a long time. Because there's an emotional connection that you have with these businesses and restaurants. It's not like for me at least, it's never like it was always impactful. And I think over time, you learn to learn and grow and create some inner growth from that experience that help you in your future endeavors, right? So I think each of those experiences, when it does happen, you never want it to happen, but it happens. Nothing lasts forever, and we're in a really, the average restaurant lasts maybe 2 or 3 years. If you get to the 1 year mark, you're like, yes, we did it. So, but I think the thing that keeps me going is some of the the legacy spots we've had. That are like, Amada 17 years, Village Whiskey's 12 years. It just, and that kind of like, it reassures me somehow. It gives me some comfort, but I think it's a tough business. It's crazy because I've had some concepts that I'm like, this is really good. It's really, but location and variables and other dynamics that are out of your control. Sometimes, those weigh into it. So what I've learned, and sometimes I haven't learned it, but like really, you got to hedge your bets, man. Get a great location. Get something that has walking traffic. It's like, and actually, Cappy, our current business model, our current day is, I'm looking at smaller footprints. If I'm not doing any big box restaurants. That's only going to be, we'll do them, but they have to be, really select locations with good partners and, lots of, density. But I'm digging like the smaller footprints. We, I partnered with a group out of Louisiana, Ballard Brands, Ballard Hospitality. They're 3 brothers who I really enjoy their company. And that's one thing, your partners, you want to make sure you have good partners, people you like to be with. And they're a franchise company. They have PJ's Coffee and Wild Wings. And so I love that, they can maybe help shape my ideas into these franchisable brands. And actually, before we joined forces, I had Buena Onda, which was my model for a fast casual taqueria. And I'm really happy to say this year in 2022, we got it into a franchise mode. We've opened 4 more company stores, and we have 5 franchises that have been sold. So we're super excited about that.
That's great.
And and so that's a space I'd like to be in and continue to foster that kind of channel my creativity, channel that into something that's sustainable. And that'd be my advice to give to anybody out there. And from a culinary, like a chef, creative culinary person, like if you can get to scalability, that's a sweet spot where you want to be in.
Thanks for watching and listening to Beyond the Plate. We hope you enjoyed a little taste of this episode. If you'd like to hear this podcast episode in its entirety, you can do so on all major podcast platforms. I'm Cappy, and remember, there are never too many cooks in the kitchen.